Hello and welcome to this video interview with Ambassador Shyam Saran. We will be discussing today India's effort to join the nuclear suppliers group, an effort that ended inconclusively, some would say ended in failure when the 48-member nuclear suppliers cartel ended its two-day plenary on June 24th without a decision on India's membership. The Seoul meeting began with a question mark. India had made its desire to join the NSG known, publicly known. The Prime Minister, the Foreign Office said that the Prime Minister was personally taking this up with Switzerland, with Mexico. We know that he met Xi Jinping on the eve, or just before the meeting started in Tashkent. Do you think that India has reason to be disappointed with the fact that the Seoul meeting was unable to resolve this issue, or do you think that this being a rather difficult question, what we are seeing is really the beginning of a process which will eventually work out in India's favor?
No two situations are quite the same. So what happened in 2008, if we take that analogy, then if you recall, we had a disappointing experience in August 2008.
The first plenary meeting.
The first plenary meeting, but that did not deter us from engaging in even more energetic.
That was quite a disaster, right? 20, 30 countries.
Yes, about 50 amendments.
Yeah.
So if an outside observer, saw this, would have thought that there is really no way in which India could possibly mobilize a consensus in favor of getting the waiver at the subsequent meeting. In fact, I think the Chinese calculation at that time was that this would not happen. If you see the People's Daily, article which appeared after that. So the fact that we were able to overcome within that period of 1 month the many voices opposing the waiver would appear to show that there is some value, there is some merit in doing active diplomacy and turning things around is possible. But I think at this particular juncture, what happened in Seoul, the one very big difference is that China, which had taken a somewhat discreet stand in opposing the waiver for India in 2008, this time around was actually very public and upfront in opposing the membership. So that actually, to me, seemed to be the one big difference in this situation.
Procedure.
Well, whatever be the reason, after all, in 2008, they also hid behind procedure. They used the same arguments that, we should have a criteria-based approach, we should not have a country-specific exception, that we should be mindful of the fact that, the international non-proliferation regime may be undermined as a result, or that, the balance in South Asia may be adversely impacted by this and may even trigger a nuclear arms race in South Asia. So the arguments actually are almost exactly the same as in 2008, but they have been made in a very public fashion and in a somewhat assertive fashion.
And repeatedly, actually.
Yes, whenever this matter has been raised, not only at the governmental level, but also, as you have seen, in the Chinese official media as well. So it appears to me that we are facing a different China. We are facing a different geopolitical situation, Don't forget that in 2008, we had virtually, with the exception of China, all the countries very enthusiastically in favor of the waiver for India. This time around, people may not have been so energetic, partly because, after all, if the idea was that the way should be cleared for some of the important countries to engage India in nuclear commerce, and derive some benefit from it by sale of nuclear fuel or nuclear reactors, that is already there as a result of the waiver. So, in substantive terms, whether you are a member of the NSG, you are not a member of the NSG, it does not really change the situation materially.
Let's go through this sequentially, because the kind of questions that people have for the benefit of our readers and viewers, if we were to take them one by one, and let's start, the questions would obviously be, why does India want to be a member? Why now? In other words, have we acted at the right time? Third, the nature of the objections that we saw in Seoul. And fourth, where do we go from here? And if we proceed in that fashion, why does India want to be a member of the NSG? Given that the major restrictions imposed on the sale of nuclear material and fuel were lifted in 2008. Is it purely a defensive desire for India to be on a committee, on a group, in a group that may later specify new rules that we can't prevent? What is it that
that is certainly an important consideration, that not being a member, you do not have any full control over future amendments. It means that the waiver that you enjoy is, in a sense, can be reversed by subsequent amendments.
As we saw in 2011.
Well, I mean, some part of it was.
Enrichment and reprocessing was
Therefore, being a member ensures that even if there are amendments which may be tabled in the future, we have a voice in how they are possibly formulated. So that's an important consideration. And what it would do is that the waiver that you enjoy currently would be formalized.
Right.
In a sense, it does not have that same level of formality as you would have if you were a member of the NSG. So there is a value in the membership. One should not belittle the importance of being a member of the NSG. Now, the issue is, if we have not been able to get membership at the Seoul meeting, does it mean that our nuclear energy plans are somehow or the other suspect, or that our access to nuclear technology or fuel are in any case are in any way impacted? No.
But the government said that it would.
Well, the government has said that, right. But let us not forget that since the waiver, we have signed long-term fuel supply agreements with a large number of countries. Now, the major
the electricity output for most of our
exactly have gone up to 80 to 85%. So this is not a small gain from the waiver. And secondly, the nuclear power plant contracts, which were still on hold with regards to, say, France, even with respect to the additional reactors from, say, Russia. And of course, the continuing saga of whether or not we are going to buy nuclear reactors from the US, all that has actually changed in favor of India. Right. So the importance of this membership is, to the extent, as I said, that it would formalize the waiver, but in terms of substantive sort of advantage of the membership, currently, since we have these long-term arrangements, I do not think we should worry too much that, this is somehow going to impact on our nuclear energy
plans.
In
2008, the waiver that was given by the NSG had a clause where India committed to adhere to the NSG guidelines, and it also had a paragraph that Indian adherence to any future guidelines would be
subject to
facilitated by the NSG consulting India. We've seen since then that there's been one major change in guidelines, which is that the NSG in 2011 in Nordvik adopted a new rule which introduced an NPT criterion for the export of
processing
and reprocessing technology. To the best of my knowledge, India was either not consulted, or if we were consulted, our protestations were discounted or were ignored, and the new rule was introduced. So, what you're saying in a sense is that membership would actually
give you a voice,
prevent that sort of thing happening.
Would give you a voice in, as I said, in the amendment process. But let me remind you that even at the time of the waiver itself, there were several countries which were asking for India to accept that there would be a prohibition on the transfer of ENR to India. And we said, no, we cannot accept that.
The waiver's language was for
exactly.
So-called
and it was not only India which was opposed, but countries like, South Africa, Brazil, Argentina were also opposed. Now, in substantive terms, our access to ENR technology is not that significant because we have our own technology with regard to ENR. Is this going to cause a problem? No, I don't think so in substantive terms. But the principle that you mentioned, that it would be better if we were part of the membership, because it would allow us to have a role to play in terms of the rule-making process. This is important precisely because, in a sense, you have been an exceptional case. Because you have been given a country-specific exemption, which is what China objected to.
Right.
What the membership would do is that country-specific exemption would actually be formalized if you become a member of the NSG. Now, yes, we have not succeeded in Seoul. My sense is, given the kind of opposition that we have seen from China, and the fact that some of the other countries are now hiding behind, in a sense, China's opposition, maybe it may be much more challenging for us to get that membership in the coming weeks and months. We should continue to try and mobilize the consensus as we had done in the case of waiver. But I don't think that we should sort of elevate this into a kind of an elemental issue for India. I do not believe that it is an elemental issue.
Do you think in that case the government erred by casting this in such a high-profile manner?
Well, you know,
deploying the Prime Minister, there is an argument that what we've accomplished as a result is the rehyphenation.
You know, if we had succeeded, then the same people would have said, you know, thanks to the, you know, very energetic diplomacy which was engaged in by the Prime Minister.
But it didn't succeed.
No,
right?
so it didn't succeed. So we are, you know, I think we should be a little fair in this respect, because I am conscious of the fact that last time around, we had to engage in very energetic diplomacy. And my sense is that we would not have been able to get the waiver if we had not engaged in that energetic
And as you said, there was a
diplomacy.
major setback in August, followed by...
Exactly. So people could have said after August, why are you doing this?
Exactly.
Because there is no hope in hell of your getting
So
a waiver.
let's talk timing now, sir. You were involved with the first phase of negotiations. You saw the India-US 2005 statement all the way through. You were in Vienna. I covered that as a reporter in 2008. What were the discussions then about possible membership of NSG? Did we raise it at the time as something that we want, or did we flag it as an issue that would come up later?
Well, you know, what happened was that, as you know, we went down to the wire, not this wire,
Yes.
to the wire when we were trying to get an agreement on the separation plan. And it was early in the morning of March 6th, I think it was, that we managed to actually get the agreement. And at that time, actually, there had been some talk of India becoming a member of those global regimes, of the four regimes. But at that time, I think because of the very difficult and somewhat acrimonious exchanges which took place between the two sides, this particular issue actually was put aside. This is something which we will see later. The kind of political capital that the US would have to deploy in order to get this would be difficult, maybe easier to try and get the waiver. Therefore, we did not actually pursue this. But the idea that we should eventually become members of these global regimes was something which was already present in 2005, 2006. Yeah.
So then in 2010 is when it gets raised again by President Obama? When he comes?
Well, I mean, it had been raised subsequently, not immediately after the waiver in 2008, but after the waiver, there were, I think, exchanges between the two sides. Okay, what is the next step?
Okay.
You know, and we need also a degree of predictability, a degree of, you know, a certain sense that you know, this is not a halfway house. And the US then agreed.
So in 2010, President Obama comes to Delhi, makes the announcement. This is followed up the next year by Dick Stratford of in the State Department presenting a so-called food for thought paper to the NSG plenary in Noordwijk in Holland, where he raises the possibility of how India could be a member. In particular, he addresses this question of NPT as a criterion by saying that perhaps the 2008 waiver for India could be treated as an equivalent agreement. Then things go quiet. From 2011 till pretty much last year, there doesn't seem to be much forward movement. Is it because the previous government didn't pursue matters, or?
Well, I frankly, I'm not in a position to really answer this question, because I was not in government during this particular period. But my sense is that, you know, at various consultations which India had with the NSG, I think an assessment would have been made whether the time is ripe for us to be able to, you know, take this particular proposal forward. there is no doubt that when the Modi government took office, there has been a certain change in style. A sense that active diplomacy, energetic diplomacy, personal diplomacy between the Prime Minister and counterpart leaders, this is something which can actually change the nature of the game. So what we have seen is not just with respect to NSG membership, but we have seen with respect to other aspects of India's foreign policy as well. Now, you may argue for or against that kind of energetic diplomacy, but I think what has resulted in this great effort to try and get this membership is the belief that, given the kind of leadership you have, given the kind of energetic diplomacy that you have, this is worth trying. Having tried, if you have not got what you wanted, I don't think you should take this as a great setback or this is the end of the road for us. I think we should cut our losses and wait for a more propitious time when we can raise this again.
Well, evaluate it and rate.
Exactly. Yeah. I think evaluating the geopolitical backdrop against which this has happened is very important.
Right, exactly.
We should be able to see why is the situation today different, why is China today different than it was in 2008. I think these are more important questions than the mere question of membership of.
So we have questions pouring in on Facebook, more than we can ask really, but I'll throw two at you. Satyabrata Pal and Bharat Karnad have suggested, this is a question by Pranav Gupta. Pal and Karnad have suggested that NSG membership is really not that important. We've invested too much into this. You, in a way, answered this.
Yeah.
But how important, again, Pranav Gupta, how important is diplomacy by stealth versus diplomacy by caution? How much does the centralization of foreign policy by the PMO matter? I think here this question is getting to the heart of the style of diplomacy, if you will. He's suggesting perhaps that pursuing this matter behind closed doors might have been more effective than making public announcements about the PM being involved and so on. Does he have a point?
As I said, that if this had succeeded, then people would have said, thanks to the personal diplomacy by Prime Minister Modi and the manner in which he sort of took it up at his level with his counterparts is what actually made the difference. Right. Because it has not succeeded this time, so you have a lot of criticism. Right. Frankly speaking, I think different leaders at different occasions have different style. I think we should allow that element of, difference in style. Right. As a professional diplomat, I would say I would certainly give greater credence to quiet diplomacy, not diplomacy by stealth, but certainly discretion. Not raise everything to the public level, not put countries in the dock. I don't think that serves our interests well by doing that.
Have we erred then, and this is the question by Aravahi Arvindan, why do we project only Chinese opposition when actually other countries are also are we making a mistake?
I would certainly hope that we do not make this into a major issue of contention between India and China. That I do not believe.
Have we already done that by saying one country?
Again, if you ask my own personal opinion, I would not have done that. I would not have identified one or two countries. You remember, even in 2008, despite the fact that it was known which countries were actually opposed to India, we never went public with, this is the country which opposed, or this is the country which voted for.
That's because you got it.
Well, we got it, but we could have also made a public statement saying, we thank the countries which supported us and these are the bad guys.
But let me be devil's advocate. Why shouldn't we? After all, if China has blocked something which is important for India, has done so in tandem with Pakistan, which is opposed to Indian interests, what is the harm in going public?
Well, we should be mindful of the fact that there is this opposition is something which is, it doesn't need a statement on the part of India to make that. There are ways in which you can make it very clear what really was the reason why we were not able to get this through. I'm saying that in terms of a official posture by the government, it is best not to raise this to a level of very major contention between India and China, because there is much more to India-China relations than just the issue of NSG membership. That's why I said earlier in my remarks that I would not make this into an elemental issue for India, because it is not an elemental issue. Yeah.
Vikrant Suryavanshi asks, despite the 2008 waiver, the Indian civil nuclear program is not up to mark. Do you think that civil nuclear liability is the elephant in the room?
Well, number one, I think perhaps people do not realize that had we not got the nuclear deal through, several of our nuclear reactors which are based on uranium would have actually faced major fuel shortages. Several of them were running much below capacity. So one of the very important gains for India has been that the issue of nuclear fuel has been now resolved. Right. And that's a very major gain, as I mentioned. Also, in terms of nuclear technology, our domestic technology, which is very good, we have been able to master the CANDO technology and have brought in our own design features, but we have not been able to go beyond the largest reactor that we have been, 700 megawatts. Now the world has moved to 1000 megawatts. Now even 1000 megawatts has become somewhat out of date. We are talking about 1500 megawatt reactors, 1700 megawatt reactors. So if you really want to upgrade your technology and reach that level which we see internationally, then again the nuclear deal has been extremely important. As you have seen, we have been able to conclude agreements with Russia. We have been able to conclude agreements with France and
Australia too.
Australia, but that is fuel. Yes. But nuclear power plants, I'm saying. Right. Now also you have the prospect of our being able to do the same with the United States of America. Is the nuclear liability bill a hindrance? For some US corporations, it is.
Even now.
Even now.
Despite the so-called FAQ.
Exactly. But I think what the government has done in terms of that insurance pool that it has introduced, with the sort of reinterpretation of some of the legislative language, it has in fact substantially overcome that concern. Not the ideal. I grant that, but I think it has at least given sufficient amount of confidence to allow major, international firms to actually think in terms of engaging.
We have two questions from Madhup Mohta. This may well be your former colleague. He says that why does India need to be in the NSG at all? We have capability and access through alternative means, and he also says that what happened in Seoul basically shows that our China policy is weak and spineless. We do not know how to bell the cat in both multilateral and bilateral fora. Strong words.
Well, the first question about why NSG membership is important to India, I think we have already covered. With regard to what happened in Seoul, frankly, some people have been arguing that we have taken too tough and public position with respect to China. As I have argued frequently, the India-China relationship is a very complex relationship. It's not an either-or relationship. It's not a relationship merely of adversaries or of collaborators. It is a mix of both. And it is extremely important that in carrying forward this relationship, that sort of balance should be maintained. Areas where we have convergence with the Chinese, we should pursue those areas of convergence. We should maintain the high level engagement that we have been able to maintain for the last 15 years, because my own personal experience has been, having sat in many of those meetings, that those summit meetings play a very important role in introducing a degree of, shall I say, calm on what could be otherwise troubled waters in the relationship. That does not mean that when our interests are threatened by what China is doing, that we should not respond to it. Certainly we should respond. In areas where there are differences in perspective, we should try and overcome those differences in perspective. But if there is clear evidence that China is working against India's interest, certainly India should respond. And I think by and large, if I look at the record of the last 15 years or so, generally speaking, governments in India, whether belonging to the BJP or to the Congress, have actually worked on that basis, and I would hope that we can keep this going. This is the reason why I said that I would not want to see the NSG membership being made into a very major point of, friction between
now,
the two
if you look at Seoul, whether we say that China hid behind these other 6 or 7 countries, or the other way around, the 6 or 7 countries hid behind China, it's clear that the opposition, whether in procedural or process terms, was more than simply pitching, and that 7 or 8 countries raised the need for objective, I think Brazil said, non-discriminatory criteria for membership of non-NPT countries. Now, the question that comes to my mind is that when the 2008 waiver uses pretty clear language about the need for broadening the effective implementation of the goals of the NPT. When you use that phrase, you're implying that India will never be a member, but there's no reason why India cannot help to contribute towards the goals of NPT, primarily as a nuclear weapon state, that you won't proliferate, and I suppose that you will also work towards universal disarmament. Now, India fulfills both of these conditions and more. If we won that battle in 2008 and actually then agreed to abide by 7 or 8 commitments, and the world can see that we have stuck by those commitments, why is it that we haven't managed to convince these 7 or 8 countries?
This is the irony that we were engaged in far more complex, far more difficult negotiations on that waiver document. This would have been a very simple case of either yes or no on the membership.
Because the waiver is a much bigger obstacle than membership.
Exactly. So, it should have been a very simple matter to actually admit India into the NSG based on precisely those conditions that are listed in the waiver. That did not happen. That did not happen because of procedural reasons. We should recognize that there are important political reasons behind this. This is why I said that there is a change as far as the Chinese posture is concerned. China is no longer hiding behind, other countries. China, my sense is that China would have been ready to be the last man standing if it came to that.
Right.
Because
so if things were pressed for an up-down vote, China would say, fine.
I mean,
my veto.
That's my judgment. I cannot prove it in any way, but my sense is the change that has taken place in China is precisely that. That today I am ready to take a public posture on this. I am ready to be the last man standing if it comes to.
So what explains that? Is it because of their perception that India has drawn close to
the
United States?
My sense is that number one, China is in a sense demonstrating that as far as these global regimes are concerned, it will no longer just be a spectator. It is par in the same league as the United States of America, and it is ready to play that role. Second, and I think it is important for us to look at the implications of this. This represents a level of commitment to Pakistan which is more than what we have seen in the past.
So this is a new factor actually.
Yes. It is not only as a proxy against India, which has been the traditional role that Pakistan has played, but also to my mind the role that Pakistan is potentially going to play as far as the very ambitious one belt, one road ambition is concerned. Pakistan is a very key factor in the success of that particular, Xi Jinping's great project.
With the China-Pakistan economic
exactly. So I think there is a willingness to show that because our interests are involved here, we are ready to give satisfaction to Pakistan, because for Pakistan it is far more important not to have India in and Pakistan out than it is for, frankly speaking, for India. Because India has the waiver, Pakistan does not. So in a sense, the commitment to Pakistan is greater, and that has implications for India, which we should be looking at. The third is, I think the Chinese sense that this hyphenation between China and India, which is being sort of fostered by the United States and others, this simply does not exist. This is one way of demonstrating
that these are two rising powers in Asia and so on and so forth.
Yeah. So that equivalence that people have tried to bring about to show that this is simply not true. We are in the driving seat. So there is a more assertive China. There is a China which believes that it is already in a very different league than, say, India is, or several other middle powers are concerned, and therefore the world must.
And the China-Pakistan relationship has strengthened.
Right.
What about the Chinese reading of the India-US relationship? Is that also somewhere a factor that they see India now? For example, the quadrilateral has been revived: India, Japan, Australia, and the US and Asia. We have repeatedly made statements about freedom of navigation in South China Sea. Are these also elements which may have
it may be
on the Chinese leadership?
There may be an element of concern, but I think China is fully aware of the fact that India is not going to become a subordinate ally of the United States, as, say, for example, Japan is, or say Australia is. That there is a degree of convergence between India and the US as far as the security environment in the region is concerned, that is quite apparent. However, I think we also need to be able to project that much of that convergence is as a result of the actions of the Chinese themselves.
Right.
Recently I was in Beijing, and we were having one of these track 2 dialogues, and if China says we are not against the freedom of navigation, and yet in the next breath says that as far as the 9 dotted line is concerned, these are the historic waters of China,
yeah.
Then how are you going to have freedom of navigation if you are virtually saying that this is part of Chinese jurisdiction?
Right.
So there are actions on the part of China which do cause a concern. We ourselves
have sharpened their border confrontation with virtually all their neighbors.
Yes, I mean there has been. Everybody recognizes, even the Chinese themselves recognize that they have been far more assertive. Now, they should not be surprised if the rest of the world is reacting to that. And the other aspect is that with we see, for example, in Asia Pacific, ASEAN was not a major power, but as a platform, regional platform, it was useful to all the major powers. Yeah. As a kind of a mediating platform, as a kind of a reconciling, and providing a little bit of a buffer in what could be major power, conflict. In the last few years, China has actually abandoned that kind of a, I would not say a explicit consensus, but a implicit consensus that we should not undermine ASEAN because it is useful to us. Now you see China going all out in terms of dividing ASEAN,
exactly.
And that is not good for the region, and I believe it's not good for China either. So when we use this mantra that we have been using, I think one should not dismiss it only as a mantra, that we need to have an open, inclusive, transparent and balanced security architecture in the region, which does not exclude China. But China should see its interest in that kind of a multilateral framework rather than seek unilateral dominance. That is something which will inevitably invite a countervailing response.
So there's a question or a comment from Samar Jodha who says, this is the larger issue here. China at every point wants us within South Asia, Pak engagement being one. Do we have any long-term strategy, or will we each time be reduced to shadow boxing? And is there a danger in India becoming an outsourced wing of the United States?
Well, I do not think that India is in danger of becoming an outsourced wing of any power, because India itself is a major power. But with regard to what is our strategy against China trying to sort of keep us tethered in South Asia, the obvious strategy is that you need to have a much better environment in the subcontinent itself.
With your neighbors.
Yeah. So unless you follow a very, very active, properly nuanced policy with respect to your South Asian neighbors, including Pakistan, and you become a champion of, say, regional integration in the region, you become the engine of growth for your neighbors, who begin to see you as an opportunity rather than as a threat.
Right.
If you create spaces, somebody will walk in. So our effort should be to make certain that as far as the subcontinent is concerned, we don't create those spaces. That we become the most relevant power for our neighbors, not because we are able to impose upon them, but because we offer better opportunities than any other power can. I think that should be really our response.
Manisha Chachara asks, with India making efforts to be a part of NSG, is the idea of NAM, or non-aligned movement, as a foreign policy objective or principle still relevant? You and I were part of non-alignment, non-alignment 2.0, so I know how you'll answer this.
Yeah, so maybe I don't need to answer it, maybe you can answer it.
For the benefit of our viewers and readers.
Yeah. There is no doubt that the non-aligned movement, has become a pale shadow of what it was. And that is because there is a completely changed geopolitical situation. I mean, you don't have a Cold War, you don't have a East-West confrontation, even the North-South confrontation has become somewhat different than before. So the non-aligned movement itself and its role has become diminished. There is no doubt about that. However, as we have argued in the non-aligned 2.0, that non-alignment as a policy or non-alignment as a framework within which India orders its relations with the rest of the world, I think it still remains relevant, because my view has been that non-alignment is nothing more than another name for strategic autonomy. And what is strategic autonomy? Strategic autonomy is that on matters of vital interest to India, it should be able to take relatively autonomous decisions. It cannot take completely autonomous decisions, because you live in a world where you have to interact with so many other powers. Yeah. Not all interests are vital, and therefore you should distinguish what is really important for you and what is not important for you. So as we discussed with regard to the NSG membership, I do not see that as an elemental issue, that requires a very, very major diplomatic effort on our part going forward. But on whether or not you have the capability and the willingness and the intention to take those relatively autonomous decisions on issues which we have determined are of vital interest to India, that is what non-alignment to me is the philosophy of non-alignment.
We're almost out of time, but I just want to come back to Seoul and the NSG. On the second and final day of the plenary, the meeting concluded with Mexico making a proposal for the NSG to continue to remain engaged on this issue of membership criteria for non-NPT countries, particularly India, and that seems to have carried the day. There will probably be another meeting later this year. Assuming that this happens, say in November or December, India has a good 5 or 6 months. What do you think is the conversation that we need to have with China, as well as with 5 or 6 of the other holdouts, but primarily with China? What can we say or do to make sure that this goes
the first order of business is that whatever criteria are going to be discussed, they do not go beyond what is there in the waiver.
Exactly.
That's very important. Right. So, if we perceive that the discussion may veer in a direction where instead of opening the door to membership, it actually becomes a occasion for imposing more onerous conditions for membership, I think we would be well advised to.
Such as signing CTBT or agreeing to a moratorium on self-protection.
I mean, because we are not there.
Things that they pushed in
because we are not there.
Exactly.
And, the evangelical countries will want to bring in as many as we saw in 2008.
Right.
So I think we have to be a little circumspect and a little, shall I say, alert to the possibility that in seeking membership, we do not actually open the door for more restrictive or onerous conditions being brought in. Yeah.
and in terms of the conversation with China? What can we say to push the envelope there?
Well, I think the diplomacy with China would really have to convince China that in terms of that larger, fabric of India-China relations and the many things on which we are working together and we need to work together. For China to, on procedural grounds, if China does not have really, as it says, any problem with India becoming a member, but it is only a procedural issue or a technical issue, then I think our effort should be to convince China that insisting on those technical grounds, having conceded the waiver for which we appreciate China's stand, does not really make sense, because there is a much larger.
But given that the Chinese objection is primarily political rather than
well, it is political, although it is being projected as procedural. So you operate on that basis.
Right.
If the Chinese are saying it is procedural, why do I want to go to them and say no, it is political?
No, not as a tutu member, but insofar as we understand some of the underlying.
So let us respond to what the formal Chinese position is, which is that it is procedural. So we can sit down and say, okay, if you have said this is procedural, can we?
Right. But a final thought. If, in fact, the strengthened Pakistan-China relationship is propelling China in taking a certain stand, is there something India could do with Pakistan? We've seen Prime Minister Modi, for example, say that he wants better relations with Pakistan. He's tried 2 or 3 times, but somehow that the car hasn't moved forward. But is there something we could do with Pakistan that would unlock this?
I think even though he may not have been successful, if you look at the record of not just Prime Minister Modi but our previous Prime Ministers as well, all of them recognized that it is very important to try and improve India-Pakistan relations, not to a level of bonhomie or friendship, but at least to the extent that it is a more normal kind of a state-to-state relations. I think that is a realistic objective.
Right.
And I think even if there are setbacks, even if there are issues, we need to be able to, pursue that policy with respect to Pakistan. My own sense has been that it is perhaps far more realistic to gain by incremental steps with Pakistan, whether it is with respect to trade or peoples-to-people relationships, or working on things which are of a larger interest like ecology or climate change. These are ways in which you can expand the scope of our engagement, even while we are dealing with difficult issues. But it is when you have a high-profile kind of a thing, like the Lahore visit, that sometimes there is almost inevitably a reaction from those who see in any improvement in India-Pakistan relations as a great threat to themselves. Somehow or the other, we need to neutralize that. And neutralization can be done, to my mind, given the record of what we were able to achieve in the 2004-2007 period, by really taking incremental steps. And I think that is the way to go.
We've covered a lot of ground in our conversation. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Well, it's been a roller coaster ride for India the last 11 years. 2005 is when India and the US first issued a joint statement envisaging the ending of nuclear sanctions on India. 3 years later, the India NSG waiver was agreed, and now we've seen in 2016 the Indian effort to join the NSG stumbling at the door because of opposition from China and a handful of other countries. We know that this issue will be raised again later this year. Be sure to tune in or regularly check in with the wire.in for our foreign policy coverage and our coverage of the nuclear issue to learn what happens to this story. Certainly, we haven't seen the last chapter written on this yet. Thank you for joining.